Nothing else. Thank you. Okay, let's start with Geeta, Jana. O Bhagavad Gita, by which Arjuna was illumined by Lord Krishna himself, and which is composed of 18 chapters within the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. O Divine Mother, destroyer of rebirth, who showers the nectar of oneness upon us, O Bhagavad Gita, my affectionate mother, on thee I meditate. All the Upanishads are the cows. The milker is the cowherd boy, Krishna. Arjuna is the calf. People of purified intellect are the drinkers. And the milk is the supreme nectar of the Gita. My salutations to the Lord, who is the source of supreme bliss, whose grace makes the mute eloquent and the crippled cross mountains. Hariom Tat Sat. Okay, so we pick up in yoga of meditation. Now, we might have noticed that what we consider to be meditation, which is coming in the morning and sitting down and closing the eyes and bringing the awareness with them and chanting mantra, whatever, was discussed for 4 shlokas. That's all. So why is that? What is meditation?
It's a state of mind. It's what carries you today.
It's a state beyond mind. It's experience of a state beyond mind, isn't it?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
The connection with God.
It's a connection with God, yeah. Very good. Very good. And we could say the state of meditation exists. Yes. You touch it, but the state exists. The state is always on. The state is always here. So it's the deep consciousness. Deep consciousness. And from the conversation yesterday, the discussion,
yes.
Deep consciousness. In the same way that the ocean has depth and stillness at the depth, and it has a surface and waviness at the surface, but it's one ocean. So too, one consciousness, but there is depth in the consciousness. So there is, and the peace, Lord Krishna has said in the discourse, the peace is my peace, the Lord's peace. It's not peace of mind.
Okay.
Mind is the wavy part of consciousness.
It's true.
What we call mind is the wavy. But still it's consciousness. Still it's the one sea, one ocean. So how to experience? So we say meditation then is natural. It exists. It's always.
Mm-hmm.
It is God's meditation. The peace is the peace of the Lord. So the state of meditation is existent, it's universal, it's eternal. So how is it that we know it? How is it that we know it? What's our relationship with it? When the mind becomes
Still.
Shivdas, when the mind becomes
Still.
and single?
Yes.
Oh, single pointed.
That was your question a couple of weeks ago. That's why I came to you. It's okay. When the mind becomes single-pointed, still implies some quiet mind. As if the mind somehow is naturally quiet. Right? But the mind is part of the outgoing faculty. It's part of the faculty of Maya, of the Lord, which creates, projects, and participates in all of this. So the mind is naturally outgoing. What we're doing is we're bringing that naturally outgoing mind back within. By doing what? By making it single-pointed. Yes.
I would even say once you actually fall into meditation, that single pointedness dissolves as well too.
It seems to, but that's all.
Yes.
It seems to. It seems to, because you lose awareness of mind. Because the only way you recognize mind is with thoughts. But mind exists as a principle. Mind principle is also eternal. It's not my mind. It's universal mind, which is a principle. Of course it is, because even though the thoughts are different with different individuals, the mind principle itself functions exactly the same.
Yes.
So there is the subconscious mind, there is the ego, and there is the conscious mind. So in every being, the ego is the feeling of being separate again. So in every being. So therefore it exists as a universal. Since it's in every being, we can say it exists as a universal. But when the mind is single-pointed, that is, when the waves have been stilled, then the awareness will naturally go to, we can say fall into or rise up into. So he is teaching meditation in this chapter. He is teaching meditation, but he's teaching the lasting meditation. So he's teaching how to bring the mind into a state of single-pointedness where it never leaves that state of single-pointedness. We all have experience with it for a moment or two, or 3, or 5, or 10, or 50, or 1,000. But still, it'll be limited. If we haven't yet broken through to getting the mind focused on what's here, because what's here all the time is eternal. And so Lord Krishna is guiding us to get the mind focused on that which is eternal. We can say get it out of the gutter, get it out of that which is constantly changing, right? It's fallen to that. It's fallen to being disturbed, but infatuated was the word we were waiting for. Infatuated with all of the changing show, and we've come to imagine that this changing show is the reality, that we've forgotten, as it were, that there's an underlying reality. And so what we're being guided to here is to see the underlying reality at all times, in all places, in all objects, to never lose track of it, to get the mind focused on this unchanging reality and see the ephemeral as existing only within the unchanging reality. So this is bringing the mind into single point where it doesn't leave that single point of focus. It doesn't have to. Kartikeya, would you read, please? It fits.
Practical wisdom. See nothing, look at nothing but your goal ever shining before you. The things that happen to us do not matter, but we become through them does. Each day, except everything is coming from God. At night, give everything back into His hand. Jnana.
Does that sound like meditation practice?
Yeah.
So it's a practical way of relating to the unity from which everything is arising, within which everything is arising. So we pick up here, and this is exactly where the Lord is with us in this chapter, and this particular discourse is on seeing me. That's not talking about the form. I can say seeing me and then ask you, where did that voice come from? And if you follow it all the way, you'll have to get to what he's talking about. Right? Yeah? So the voice itself is an ephemeral, it's an effect. But it's an effect of what? Where did it come from? Where did your voice come from? Where did it originate? And how is it that it's your voice? Because it's universal also. Huh. So, as your mind, this is 28-29. We read 28-29 the day before yesterday. Just 29. As your mind becomes harmonized through yoga practices, you begin to see the Atman, the I, in all beings in yourself. You can also say Lord. And you see the same self everywhere and in everything. So, your speech and my speech, say something, please, dear.
I'm not sure what to say.
There you go. Om Namah Shivaya or Om Dum Durga would be really good in that moment. When it becomes the background of the mind, that's what you'll say at that moment. So, but anyway, do you suppose that your voice and my voice, they come from the same place? That they're reflective of the same principle? We deal with principles here. Mind works a certain way. Speech works a certain way. Movement works a certain way. Breath works a certain way. These are all, the elements go together in a certain way. The atoms move in a certain way. So we're dealing with universal principles, not just universal material, but universal principles as well. So can you come to see that universal in the many? It's a practice, right? Is it? Because it's there, isn't it? In fact, really, it's all that's there. Because since everything is universal, only the universal is here. So through the practice, and what does that mean? Here's the beautiful part. As your mind becomes harmonized, as your mind becomes tuned, harmonized, harmonious, not discordant, not looking for differences anymore, but happy to be in the unity of things, harmonious, not discordant. So as the mind becomes harmonious through the practices of yoga, which it naturally does as long as you stick with your sadhana. Abhyasa.
Yes.
Constant practice, strong resolve, constant practice. So this in this discourse also is being encouraged to know. He said, he's like every way, he tells us what the problem is if we don't do it, and then he tells us what it's like if we do. Which is then you reside with me. Such a yogi is at peace, undisturbed. Such a yogi enjoys the bliss of the self non-stop, without disturbance. So he says this. And to encourage us to it, because it's not easy to right? Because the mind, according to its old tendencies, is still wanting to wander and to differentiate and to create disharmony and discord because it doesn't know any better. It's the way it is. It's the principle. But the yogi, what does that refer to? That refers to the one of strong resolve. Says, this will not do. Yes, and resolves and starts to tame that wild horse and starts to bring it within. So as your mind becomes harmonized, and that's honest to God what's happening, even when we talk with people who've just had the practice of asanas for a few months, and we ask them what their experience is, they'll say, well, I'm not as disturbed anymore. Now, if they stop there, the disturbance will come back.
Yes.
It's just a taste. Having had a taste, you're to be motivated to dive in. So you're going to have to go deeper, because otherwise all the disturbances will come back. If you just stick with one little aspect of yoga. But here, the Lord is not teaching one little aspect of yoga. The Lord is teaching the real yoga. You begin to see Atman, the self in all beings and all beings in yourself. You see the same self everywhere and in everything. And that's what's here, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, we took a moment with these universal principles. That's what's here, isn't it? It's only that from which the universal principles are flowing that's here. It's logic, but it's true, isn't it? Yeah. So there's one voice, there's one speaker, many channels. There's one mind, one thinker, many thoughts. And so here we're being guided to this, to see, to develop a harmonious mind, an inwardly reflecting mind, a mind, what does that mean? To the center of everything, to the center of these photographs and this and all of this, to where finally nothing disturbs and we see the one self in all. Okay, here's a commentary from Swamiji. He says, Sri Krishna speaks of the mind harmonized through yoga. Without equanimity of mind, one can never see oneself in all beings and all beings in oneself. That means you rise above the superficial differences to the very essence of which everything is made. You rise above the changes of name and form. Nature is filled with name and form, but behind those is one essence. So we were just talking about different phenomena of nature, speech and breath and movement and all of this. This is consistent across all of nature, right? Oh. The atom, is this moving? If it weren't moving, you couldn't see it.
It's moving.
So nature is filled with name and form, but behind these is one essence. Even the scientists agree, which is absolutely the case. He says this, even the scientists agree. I'll add, it's absolutely the case. Scientists are looking for the unification theory, for the one essential truth underlying. They thought 150 years ago, modern scientists of that time, thought that they would find a particle that was common to all of matter by diving deeper and deeper and deeper. They thought they'd find one little ball bearing from which all of the bowling balls were made of. One little ball from which all of the material objects were made of. But what they discovered instead was when they went deep enough, they discovered a wave. And that was what we called the discovery of quantum behavior. But still, they looked and it got freaky at that point. It got very freaky at that point. So, the physicists talk about how freaky it is because the discovery was that things seem a certain way, but their reality is not that way. So that's what the yogi has to face. And it seems this way to me, but it's not this way. And since we're living in our own inner world, we're constantly bombarded by the feelings of what it seems to be, and we have to overcome them, or there's no peace. Right? We have to somehow go beyond those feelings. And that's where it's very hard. Right? Because that means sadhana doesn't stop. You don't get to the point where you say, okay, I'm done now. Because the potential is there for those feelings, once again, to take over, that feeling of otherness. There's no other here, in truth. But it seems as if there is. So, but even the scientists agree, there's only one essential truth. There's only one. They say all you see isn't real in the ultimate sense, it's real in the relative sense. This is what science will say. Einstein, when he talked about a dear one who died, he said it's a great mystery because in fact there's no death. But he said it seems as if she's dead. But relative reality has limitations and it changes constantly. That's part of nature. Anything that constantly changes cannot be absolutely real. Sometimes you say one thing, sometimes you say the opposite. Are you truthful or are you a liar? Is it true? Sometimes you say one thing, sometimes you say the opposite. Is it true, Devi? Yeah, right. You see it. You catch that. Yashoda, is it true?
Absolutely. Namah Shivaya.
Oh, no, Shivaya. So then he asked the question, so are you truthful or are you a liar? In the same way, when things constantly change, they can't be real. You have to answer that question by saying, well, neither. There's something deeper at work here. Once I was called a little baby. After a few years, I was called a boy. Then I was called an adult. Now they might call me an old man. What is true then? Which is real? The name keeps changing. That's the very nature of nature. Outside the mouth, it was an apple. Inside the mouth, it becomes pulp. When it goes into the stomach, it becomes carbohydrates, sugar, and roughage. Then when part of it comes out, again, it's totally different. So nature constantly changes. The changing aspect isn't the real essence, but the essence that gives room for all the changes is what's real. That is the absolute reality. There are two realities in life. Always remember both. Forgetting either one brings problems. If you only think, yes, we're all spirit, then you cease to function in a normal way and aren't fit for a worldly life. So you're not fit to be here. And you can't progress. So there's that one side. This is dealt with in Kena Upanishad. That's really the focus of the Kena Upanishad. Is that there are two types of knowledge, and both are to be known. At the same time, if you live only on the superficial level, then you're constantly seeing the differences alone, and that creates many problems. Who is she? Who is he? I'm different, you're different. Tension comes, then rivalry and hatred. Likes and dislikes arise, but the real yogic way of living is to keep both realities in mind, the absolute reality and the superficial or manifested reality. So like you said the other day, it was a statement, well, first, you have to know this. Both. We have to know both. We have to know both what this is so that there's no disturbance. So that you're not constantly freaking out.
So knowing the unreal or the appearance of the object is necessary.
Both are necessary.
Yes.
Both are necessary. Both are necessary. Otherwise, how can you relate to anyone or anything here? And how can you, if you don't, coming, just one sec. If you're not able to relate to both, if you're not able to relate to the deeper reality of things, then you're constantly freaking out, constantly involved in fear and the anxiety of separation and anger and hatred and all of that stuff. So no peace for you, no happiness for you, nor anyone around you. And so this is what we call the normal state of life somehow, which is not seeing the depth, not seeing the reality here. But if you go the other side and you say, everything is Brahman, this isn't really... And then it's fine at some level, but how will you sustain the body?
Gotta pick up the cup.
Yeah, you have to pick up. It's not a cup, but you pick it up anyway. This is not a hand. This is not a cup.
Oh, that's what we call it.
Oh.
That's, I guess you just answered the question. I wanted clarification or more explanation as to why knowing that you're just spirit will not allow you to function. It's like just knowing and thinking that you're spirit, how is that too negative?
Yeah. Then it's not possible to function in the relative world. And if you can't function in the relative world, then you can't achieve the purpose for which you came.
How? Like that's
It's relational. It's relational. Freedom requires you to bring the entirety of this I into alignment.
Oh, the entirety.
This little I, bring the entirety of it into alignment. Which means you're going to have experiences, and you're going to have to come into that deeper knowledge, deeper awareness, until finally you could say all the karma is clear like that, which isn't really true, but it's like that, where nothing disturbs any longer, like that. So the experience that we're given is in the world, but not of the world. And so maybe we continue.
So Swamiji, that's why two people together would have to call it a cup, right? To relate to each other.
If we're to use language,
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, to use language.
and language is only relational.
Yeah.
Oh.
Relation. Right.
If one is to enjoy the beauty of what is, one will need to come to see, to sense what is in the effects. There's a question as to why is there a world? And it's one of those questions that really doesn't have a good answer. It's a question that's not asked by the one who resides in the truth. It's not asked inside. It doesn't bubble up. There's no question about it that comes. Because in fact, there's not a world. But there is the appearance of one. And so, why would there appear to be a world? So I remember reading a particular book before I went to India, and the author was having fun with it. He'd had an experience, and then he came to live in that experience of unity. And so he asked this question. He said, Did you ever play the game hide and seek? How he remembers this.
Yeah.
Did you ever play the game hide and seek? Is it a fun game? Do you enjoy it?
Yeah.
Yeah. For a kid, it's the number one game, isn't it? Yeah, it's the game that when they're in community, they keep coming back to. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though during the time that you've lost the other person, or you're hiding and you haven't been found yet, there's great anxiety. You remember that?
Yeah.
It feels very real.
Yeah, because it really seems like they're gone and I may never find them
Yeah.
again, depending upon the... Yes? You remember feelings like that? Or,
Yeah.
I wonder, am I going to be here all day? I remember that kind of a thought. Am I going to be here all day? Are they ever going to find me, And then eventually I just hop out. Did they forget to look for me? So why in the world would we enjoy a game with that much anxiety? And stress? What's the answer? There's an answer. If you think about it for a moment, why in the world would you enjoy that?
It's a game.
Because it's a game, and it's such a joy to find or to be found.
It is. It's the...
Bingo.
I would play that with my dog, and my dog would have anxiety of the worship.
So how would you play hide and seek with yourself? How would you hide yourself from yourself?
With the mind.
Yeah, you would find a way, and it would look a lot like this.
Wow.
And then you would discover, you would go on this great search. So much anxiety. You'd look for it everywhere. You look for it in the mirrors, in the pictures, in this person, and that person. And finally,
It's the cosmic joke.
you'd look in the place you hadn't looked before. So the question is, as to why is an interesting question. It's one that's said typically not to be asked. But there's an assumption that there's something wrong. But there's not necessarily something wrong. So here we're just being given the guidance on how to find. Lord Krishna is giving us the guidance on how to find yourself. And to find yourself, you're going to have to find yourself in everything. You're going to have to find it in what you imagined yourself to be, and you're going to have to find it within what you didn't imagine yourself to be. Right? You're going to have to find it within, and you're going to have to find it without, and discover that same essence in all. So in order to do that, there has to be an all. And we have to, that's a relational question. So if you just find it, something within yourself, and you say that's it, and you stop there, and you refuse to relate to anything else, then you're not there. How will you know? Because something will happen to shake you from your slumber. Somebody soon enough will be screaming at you. And how are you going to be then with saying all is spirit? In the Buddhist tradition, there are these in the koans, Zen Buddhist tradition. The student will tell the teacher, I've got it, I understand. Everything is the same essence. There is only that essence. There is nothing else. I am not this body. And the student says, okay, very well. And then he slaps him on the head. And then he does it again. And he does it again. And the student says, what in the world are you doing? Why are you doing that? And the teacher says, well, it shouldn't bother you because you're not the body. Why are you disturbed? So it's a work, it's a puzzle that's needing to be solved. It's a work that's needing to be completed. If one is actually to reach the state of yoga, then one has to literally find the essence within all. And there's a practical lived reality. I mean, yeah, this serves as a cup. And yeah, there's something that we call tea inside of it and all of this. And it's to be understood. It's not to rule you. You don't want to lose yourself to the forms and such. Yeah, it's being shared. You want to see what they are. So here Swamiji is sharing, we actually need the knowledge of both. We need both of those. If we go too far one way or the other, then we miss the point.
Yeah, yes.
Kyle, you were going to add something else.
I just got, I'm not sure.
Oh,
So-
okay. Here are a few more, the shlokas 30. Those who see me wherever they look and recognize everything as my manifestation never again feel separate from me, nor I from them. Does that resonate?
Yeah.
Yes.
He says the same teaching put a different way. When you learn to see the essential unity, you're in full communion with the ultimate, and you are never apart from that. So finally, this knowledge wants to be unshakable, that nothing can disturb. And it's called, and that's meditation. And practice of it is meditation practice. Whoever becomes established in the all-pervading oneness and worships me abiding in all beings, however he or she may be living, that yogi lives in me. Right? In a worldly life, with kids, with a husband or a wife, a partner, working in a factory, serving as a yoga instructor, tour guide,
Selling BD cigarettes.
selling cigarettes, yeah. So that yogi lives in me. The yogi who perceives the essential oneness everywhere naturally feels the pleasure or pain of others as his or her own. And we can come back to that discussion in the morning. That is something that happens. And that's also a point where we might tend to draw back. I'll read again. The yogi who perceives the essential oneness everywhere naturally feels the pleasure or pain of others as his or her own. Empathy, compassion, yeah, very good. Empathy, compassion. It's like in erasing this, like we drew with a pencil a line, and we say, I'm inside of this line, and you're outside of this line. And so therefore, I will experience what's inside the line, and you experience collectively what's outside the line. Right? But then when you go through life, you find someone that you want as a friend, you develop a friendship between you, and that's a matter of erasing part of the line and drawing it again around the two. And now, if you're very close friends, then you start to feel what the other person feels as your own, right? And they feel what you feel as their own. So these lines are actually imaginary lines. So if you erase the lines completely, then there's no border anymore. There's no limit anymore. So you naturally feel what all feel. You just naturally do. See, we get hung up on the idea that yoga is about a particular experience. That to be happy, you need to have a particular experience. You get really hung up on this. Yoga is not about having a particular experience. Yoga is the allowing of any experience that is to come. Any and all. And remaining undisturbed regardless of the experience. Because you have a clear and firm understanding of what's underlying that experience. So you're no longer saying, I will only be willing to experience this. When you say to Ma, bring it on, this is what you're saying. I open myself to any experience that's here. Yeah, that's a universal statement. And it's an opening. So we'll pick it up and discuss a little bit more tomorrow morning. And I'll share a little story in the morning, perhaps. Okay, we'll close with Final Prayers and Arati. Page 174. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukneva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukneva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukneva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu, Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu, Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu, Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Shantu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Makashit Dukhabhag Bhave, Asuto Ma Satgamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya, Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudashyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Adorable Lord of mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto Thee. Thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Thou art Satchidananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold Thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve Thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember Thee. Let us ever sing Thy glories. Let Thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in Thee forever and ever. And below Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki, and for all the saints and sages of all the traditions. That's right.